Well, it's a delight for me to be here as well, and I have enjoyed staying with Vicki the last few days because she actually let me scramble my own eggs. I've been traveling for a month, eating what people put before me, and it's not always easy on the stomach, and Vicki said, "What do you feel like?" I just feel like scrambled eggs. And so it's been great. We have had a good time together. Know a lot of people in common. And I would love to be able to sit next to all of you and hear your story. Unfortunately, you're going to be hearing mine this morning. But that will open up time to talk when we have a little bit of break for a little discussion around the table, perhaps. We're just glad you're here. I come from a beautiful place in the United States. I don't know if any of you have been to Colorado, but we would be the Alps of the United States. I live in the Rocky Mountain National Park. 3,000 meters high is where I live. And it is one of the most beautiful places. We have 300 days of sun. You all need to come. And it is wonderful. But I'll tell you, I was quite excited when I knew that we would be near the Alps. We were in France, and my husband said, let's take a long drive and go around and see Mount Blanc. And so, yeah, I was excited to be in the Alps. We got there, and look what we found. Totally clouded in. I never saw Mount Blanc, and I haven't seen it to this day. I know it's there, but we never saw the sun. I look at this picture and I say, this is a bit like my life on the inside. People wouldn't know that looking at me. And I was raised in a wonderful family, but I was trained to play my part, trained to wear a smile that said life is wonderful. But the reality is that on the inside, backstage, off the stage, life wasn't so wonderful. It first came in the form of discouragement, then in intense sadness on the inside. Finally, I was able to admit that it was, in fact, depression. I was always afraid of what people would say if they knew the real me. And perhaps some of you can understand that even from your own experience. And I learned, because of a time during my 40s, I began to cry out for help. I said, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of being depressed. There has to be reasons. I'm so thankful for the very significant people in my life. One was my husband, and I will share in a little bit some of the things that he has helped me through. Not all husbands are so understanding of this issue, and you may be married to such a man. But there was also other significant women that helped me work through some of my negative thinking patterns and come to understand why I was depressed. And a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you, I share from my own personal journey. Now, I give a disclaimer here. I am not a professional, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a counselor. I'm a patient. Someone who has just learned through life how to climb out of that hole that often I would find myself in. I'm going to be dealing with the issues of what I call normative depression. Now, there is another whole area which I would call depressive disorder, clinical depressive disorder. Many people are faced with this. It's a very complex issue, and of course, I don't want to minimize the pain that some people go through by covering it in a general sense this morning, but there is a requirement often for medical intervention. That was not true in my life, and I think it was because I really sought to understand where these thoughts were coming from and take the steps that I needed to take to deal with that personally, individually, with the help of a few friends and two significant counselors in my life. So I'm just going to share with you my journey, and hopefully it will be a help. Some of you are here because you yourself have dealt with this, and I hope you will leave here feeling a little bit relieved. You are not alone. Others of you live with someone who is depressed or sad, or life is just clouding over. And I'm glad that you're here because you will glean some things that will help you understand those people in your life that you love, some friends perhaps. And it is important for all of us to have the tools to help deal with that in these days when we see so much of this rampant. And it will be a question that we might discuss right at the beginning. Why is this such an issue in our time? It's very personal to me lately because one of my former students in September took her life. I would never have imagined that this beautiful girl who was always happy, always bearing the burdens of others, had so many burdens of her own to bear. And yet this was the case. And so it's very personal, and I feel it's very important for us to be honest and open about these things as women in particular. The realities, of course, are that we women who think not only with our heads but respond to life with our hearts are in this life of tension. It's a balancing act to keep life together as a woman. There are so many demands upon women today. Now, I don't know if this would be people in this room, but I know from my own life, trying to balance a home with a career, with raising children, and in my case, also having my mother-in-law live with us, that's a juggle. I'm exhausted a lot of the time. I wonder how many of you would say, I'm exhausted a lot of the time. Yeah. And you can understand why. Can you imagine trying to hold it together like that? Well, there's also in these days an absence of meaningful relationships that can come alongside to help. And as I have seen and met many of you, you're from other countries. You are separated from the significant people in your life who could come alongside to help. And you're doing it on your own. In such a world with the speed and the dynamic and the pace of life that is around us. And if you are challenged also by the burden of caring for elderly parents, as I am, the anxiety over rising cost and paying the bills, unexpected illness, in my case, long-term physical limitations, no wonder life clouds over, right? No wonder. There are those times when we feel we just can't hold it together anymore. I came out of a very religious family. And in my family, there was a sense in which negative emotions were wrong. And instead of dealing with them, therefore, I covered them up because there was a shame and a guilt that came along with it. I've had people in my family say, you have so much going for you. There's no reason for you to be depressed. My husband, who is an eternal optimist, said, Bonnie, lighten up. Life can't be that bad. Those kind of comments to cheer me up didn't cheer me up at all. The reality is I became depressed because I was depressed. And I see some of you shaking your head. You know what I mean. Because you weren't allowed to be who you really were inside. Well, I want to tell you that I believe depression is a symptom of something. As fever is to the body, depression is to the soul. I would call your soul, your mind, your will, your emotions. That is going on inside of you. This thought just comes to my mind. Some people say, what is your soul? I think your soul is that part of you that you know is really there when you look in the mirror and you say, oh, I don't look, am I really looking that old? I don't feel that old. The I there is your soul. That's who you really are. It's ageless. That's why you can be 96 years old and still feel like a child. Because your soul is that real part of you. This outward body is going to change, go away, but your soul is the real you. Now, fever in the body is a gift. I'm glad for fever. It tells us something is going wrong that we need to get attention for. The same thing is true of depression. It's a symptom. It tells you something is going on in that real you, that soul down deep inside that needs attention, something that has been wounded, something that needs help. And as a part of that healing process, I believe it involves the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual. We're going to touch on all three of those as we go through this series this morning. Basically, we're going to, in this first section, talk about giving ourselves kindness. And then not this afternoon, excuse me, we're going to take a break. And then before you leave at lunch, we're going to talk about how to give your emotions release. And then how to give your mind the truth. Because this is probably one of the biggest problems in this whole area of depression. First, we want to give to ourselves kindness. Someone has said emotions are like children. They need to be cherished, understood, cared for. At the same time, they must not be given the keys to the car. Right? In other words, they must not control us. Giving yourself kindness is coming to understand in some measure the reason for the sadness that you feel, and learning how to nurture that part of you that feels wounded. And we will talk right through this seminar of other significant people that can help us with that. One day I sat down and just started to list all of the reasons why I felt like I was depressed. Actually, there were 10 of them. I'm not going to go through all 10. I've sort of narrowed it down to 7. 7 of what I would call the roots of depression that probably come to all people sometime during their life. The first one may be a surprise to you. I'm spelling the word depressed. I didn't have to work very hard to make this work. It just was there. And you may not say, well, that's a pretty heavy word. Well, depressed is anything that makes you feel down. Anything that makes you feel down, that pushes you down, that weakens you. So we're using it in a very broad term as we look at this. The first one is interesting, and I would never have suspected it played such an important role in my own life. My disposition. What is your disposition? Your personality, your temperament type. Now, we probably are all on a continuum between two different kinds of people, extroverts and introverts. It would be very interesting to raise hands. I won't do that, but you might talk around your table. Some of us in this room are extroverts. My husband is an extrovert. Interesting, often extroverts marry introverts, which presents a big problem. Opposites attract, and then opposites attack. Extroverts are energized by people. They're outgoing, they're assertive, they love to talk, they're very comfortable in a group, they have lots of friends, they love Facebook, they embrace change and love open spaces, they're always busy and they crave adventure. And our society gives very high marks to extroverts. Just watch the reality shows. Do you have those in Switzerland? We call them reality shows in the United States. It's all extroverts that are on there. I would hate to be on such a thing. I would not want to show my face. Because I'm an introvert. I was trained to be an extrovert, but I'm an introvert. Introverts are energized by solitude. They're serious. They're reflective. They're reserved and quiet by nature. They enjoy a few close friends while resisting crowds. They're intensely focused on their work, and they love quiet places and spaces where they can think and process. Of course, one of their weaknesses is that they would tend to struggle with change, and they take life very seriously, and they have a tendency towards depression. Lest you feel sad about that situation, there are a lot of famous people who struggled with depression very seriously. Studies show that painters, writers, musicians, actors have higher rates of depression. So do great leaders. Great leaders like Martin Luther, deeply depressed. through the earlier part of his life. Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln. If you don't know that lady, do you know who Joanne Rowling is? Yeah, she wrote Harry Potter, Harry Potter books. And of course, Robin Williams is an actor who died, I think, a couple years ago. Van Gogh, of course, took his life. Princess Diana. She's down here. I'm sorry for those of you who are sitting down. I didn't realize that I was going to have to clear that area, so I will tell you what's there. Anyway, yes, these kind of people, and many, many, many others, if you read people's biographies, have struggled with this over the years. And if you are a reader of spiritual works, a famous man in England called Charles Spurgeon, who wrote a lot of books, he struggled with depression, which was really a shock to me because he seemed so positive in his writings. But that's because of what he learned and through what he worked through in the spiritual part of his life. Now, in the past generation, they used to call this involuntary melancholy. Involuntary melancholy. In other words, this would be a mood that would come over a person that they simply could not help. That suddenly there would just be a darkness that would come over. And I understand this. My sister is an extrovert. My mother-in-law, who lives with us, is an extrovert. And sometimes, especially when I am with them, and my mother was an extrovert, there would be a darkness that would just come upon me because I would constantly be comparing myself to them and feeling like a failure. That I simply could not be as happy-go-lucky as they seemed to be. It seemed to be, to me, that I was boring and they were having all the fun. I have told my husband many times, I am sorry, I am so boring. And if you are here and struggle with depression, you may feel that way too. Because it seems like everybody else is having so much fun. I remember one particular night, we were having a meal with my father in the middle, my sister on the other side, and having a good conversation together. And then suddenly my dad turned his back to me and began making jokes with my sister. I was left totally out of the conversation. If I try to be funny, I'm not funny. If you laugh at me today, it wasn't intended. So please do laugh because that made me feel good about myself. But my sister is carrying on with Dad, and he was having so much fun with her. And so suddenly I just felt like the shades just came down on the inside of me. I got up, said, well, I'm good for washing dishes. So I went and washed the dishes from the dinner. I went up to my room. I called my husband. I said, Chris, my husband, I am depressed. He said, when did it start? He said, it started at dinner. What happened? And I told him. I said, I guess I'm just jealous of my sister. He said, no, it's deeper than that. And then he said the famous words, and this is that spiritual component that we're always going to be tying in because this is important. My husband said, Bonnie, you have never accepted the person God created you to be. You have never embraced the person you are. That is very, very significant. Now, the Bible helped me along this line because these words in the Bible have often been seen on posters and things that are very, very wonderful. And I hope that you are listening with your soul to these words said to you. For you, God, formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I love one translation that says, I am intricately complex. How many of you feel you're complex? Oh man, I can't understand myself a lot of the time, but that is some of the beauty of myself. Wonderful are your works, God. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. I am woven from the genes of my mother, the genes of my father, They are both, in many ways, extroverts, but both of my grandmothers were introverts. One was an artist. One was a lovely, deeply caring woman. And as I have thought about this, I have thought, God, you made me this way, and I need to embrace who I am. You see, it is my nature, this introverted part of me, that makes me sensitive to the feelings of others. It's a perfect fit for the work I love. I'm a teacher. I have to think and reflect. I'm a mentor. I'm a counselor for young adult women. If I did not have this personality, I would care less, because that's one of the weaknesses of extroverts. They are not sensitive to the emotions of others. My husband's had to learn it from living with me. If you're an introvert, I believe you need to hug yourself. You need to be kind to the unique person that you are. That's the first thing. Give kindness to yourself. This is who you are, and it is beautiful. It is wonderful. It is needed in a world of sorrow and sadness. We have got to have people who care about emotions. And if you are that woman, be thankful. Be thankful. Now, the second struggle that people have who are depressed, and this I would imagine is quite true in this room, is that people that are introverts are often perfectionist, idealist, very meticulous. I am happiest in my life when life is on time, when it's organized, and when it's clean, and when it's tidy. I cannot work in chaos. I have to have a place for everything, and everything a place. I think I must have some Swiss blood in me somewhere, right? Someone just recently told me that Swiss homes are like museums. And I would say that is true on the bottom level of my floor. Just don't go upstairs, and please don't look at my closets. So I'm a perfectionist to a point, though I have learned as I have grown older, I'm in my 70th year, I have learned to let go of some of it. But the struggle that I have is mainly in my relationships. I'm a very much of a perfectionist person. You see, I always want to be sure everybody is happy. I want to please everyone. Therefore, I have a lot of anxiety about that, a fear of failure. I'm driven. I'm overly conscientious. I always feel like I need to improve. I feel responsible for everybody, for everything, and I'm devastated when things fall apart. This is the making of what we call performance stress, because you feel like you're constantly performing. Oh, there, I forgot to put it on for you to see. Perfectionist, idealist, meticulous. Yes, performance stress. The problem is that you cannot fix, as you see, perfectionist extroverts work hard to fix everything. Are you a fixer? We want to have control over everything, because that's when we feel happy. That's when we feel at peace, when there is control. But you can't always control the inside of yourself or people. And I would suggest that if you're a perfectionist, an idealist, or you're meticulous, you are always disillusioned. You are always discouraged. You are always disappointed with other people. And you're always disappointed with yourself. It just goes with the territory. This comes from high standards of expectation. I had a conversation with a woman last month. This is her quote. She said, I was 27. I had everything I wanted, and yet I was tormented because I was so unhappy. I didn't know who I was. I didn't understand love and what it meant to love God, to love others, and to love myself. I would say that is often the way a perfectionist feels. And there are two things that I think are really, really important for you to understand. Number one, we were made, I believe, in the perfect image of God for perfect relationships. That desire for perfection, that longing to have everything in a row and everything organized and everything perfect, that ideal is part of our nature that we were born with. But the problem is that nature is also selfish, is also self-centered, and we have fallen so short of the standards that we have erected for ourselves. We are broken. We are broken. Now, I didn't think I was broken. Somebody said, if you want to know what's wrong with you, go to a psychiatrist or get married. I got married. Now, that's my wonderful husband. He's 5 years older than I am. I waited 10 years for that man. And I was sure that by the time that we got married, it would be perfect. I married my husband with high expectations of him and of myself. And for the first 15 years, I constantly struggled with disappointment. In fact, one time my husband in desperation said, I am not God. I can't make you happy. I was greatly helped by C.S. Lewis, who said you get married expecting heaven and you get earth. We get earth. The reality is that we aren't perfect. So how do we give ourselves kindness? Well, I think we got to think about some things. I think this is where our reflective nature is a help to us. Sometimes I have to sit myself down and I have to say, okay, what am I going to value? Am I going to value things that I need to have organized, or am I going to value people? I remember my mother rushed around, and Christmas is coming, ladies, whether you like it or not. But Christmas, when we would all come home, longing to be and have time with Mom and Dad, we never saw Mom because she wanted everything done just so. And finally, I remember the Christmas that all of us adult children Sunday says, Mom, will you just sit down? We want to be with you. We could care less about the meal. We could care less about those decorations and traditions we've always done. We just want you. And I've tried in the next generation to do better, even though I still have that tendency. I also think we need to be real and not try to be God. I heard that the Emperor of Japan said one time, you know, the emperor was always divine. And he said, I have had so many anxieties since I become God. I tell you, you will have a lot of anxiety if you're God. But you're not. Isn't that a relief? So let yourself off the hook. Thirdly, offload your expectations. Not onto your husband. He would say, oh, thank you. I think this is that spiritual component again. Yes, there's a psychological component, but there's also a spiritual component. And I believe one of the most wonderful things for me has been having a talking relationship with God, which we'll talk more about in the next session, but where I can really come to Him and offload. The words of Jesus said, come unto me, all you who are weary and weighed down with burdens, and I will give you rest. Or one translation says, I will rest you. Isn't that wonderful? And there are times that I just sit and meditate, tell God the burdens, and just telling Him the burdens, saying, God, would you give me clarity? What do you want me to do? What's important? What's the priority here? What do my children really need? I think I know what they need, but what do you think? Sometimes just sitting there and talking to Him. You say, well, I really don't know how to do that. Well, I'll give you some help a little bit in the second session. The third issue is, of course, the physical factor that must be taken seriously. There is so much going on in your brain. It's a marvelous but mysterious organ. They say that there is a major genetic component to depression. 30% of cases are a genetic thing. In other words, you can trace that tendency towards depression back to other significant people in my life. In my case, my two grandmothers. There's chemical imbalance in the brain. There's certain illnesses and medications that can cause depression. Our moods can be impacted by our hormones and the glands that produce those hormones that we really don't know a lot about. They're just beginning to discover. So what are some of the things that you can think about when you look at those physical factors? I'm not qualified to speak of those as a professional doctor, but I would recommend several things. And these things I did. Number one, you need to get checked out. You need to get checked out by a doctor. And make sure that nothing is going on that you can't see. Medication may be needed temporarily, but I really believe, women, that to medicate the mind and emotions into submission is not a permanent healing in and of itself. It may help you temporarily, but it should not be used as a permanent healing. They say that exercise, and you knew I was going to say this, right? Research has shown that exercise can be as effective as medication in fighting depression. A 10-minute walk can improve your mood for 2 hours. Interesting. I encourage you to make yourself move vigorously through your day. Take the steps instead of the elevator sometimes to get the blood pumping. Also important, if you struggle in this area, is to be sure that you are sitting in the sun or direct sunlight at least 15 minutes a day. Now, what do you do when you get no sun? You've got it now, but just get outside, get into the sun, pull back the curtains, put up the shades. Do not allow yourself to sit in darkness. That only makes the mood more difficult. This is very important. I have noticed with depressed people, they tend to keep their drapes pulled, the shades down. This only makes it worse. Now, these are small steps you take, but if you're serious about dealing with it, you must make them. Thirdly, watch your diet. This is a good picture, for those of you who can see it, for Americans. I think I don't know, do you eat pizza over here? French fries, chips, all of that stuff? I do know you eat Swiss chocolate. You can put Swiss chocolate on that other side. You see, these certain foods, caffeine, alcohol, sugar-rich foods, carbs, they give you a quick burst of energy, but they dump you in a few hours, and that dumping feels depressive. You must discipline yourself in your diet. You must. And then I would encourage you to learn to give your brain a break. Your brain needs time to relax. Therefore, I encourage you to pick up a hobby, something that you really enjoy, a book, a sport, something where you don't have to think deeply, think reflectively. Find something that you can do that will just give your brain a rest, because this is so needed in this area of depression. We're whole beings. Our body, soul, and spirit must work together to bring health back to the emotional part of our lives. Number 4 is rejection. This is probably one of the deepest roots, I believe, of depression. These are wounds that inflict a person with deep emotional pain. And they come in several ways. I almost don't even need to mention the whole area of abuse. If you have been abused, sexually abused, verbally, you will live with emotional scars that need to be understood. Abandonment issues, where you were in a family that did not nurture you, or where mom and dad were gone. There is that sense of abandonment. This was true for a friend of mine named Carol. Her father had been physically abused as a young boy by his father, who beat him. And Carol's father was so worried about bringing this abuse into his family that he vowed never to touch his children. He never touched his daughter, Carol. He always stayed away from her. And all of her life, she struggled with that feeling that she was totally rejected and unloved by anyone and everyone. I have a sibling who was sexually abused when he was 12 years old. We knew he was depressed. We knew that he was struggling. We had no idea why. But after many, many, many years of painful struggle and the breakup of a marriage, he got help. And it came out, and the family was shocked, and yet we understood. For 1 whole year, a man who was living in our home sexually abused him. You see, someone has said if we knew everything about everybody, we would forgive everybody of everything. And many times, the things that are going on inside of you have come because of people who have also been rejected. And they're projecting it now onto the next generation. The reason why we must have help. Wise counseling to help us sort through and understand. And to be kind to ourselves. Because these things are there for reasons. I would also add family dynamic is a big one. How I wish I had more time to talk about this. Families are either expressors or stuffers. Now, if you come from Italy, a few women on my table know, I have a feeling that you come from families who are expressors. My family did not express their feelings. They stuffed their feelings. If you had any negative feelings, you were sent to your room until you learned to be happy. So all negative feelings were put right under the rug. Nobody was allowed to feel those things. And what happens if you're in a family of stuffers? You push things down deep inside. You don't deal with them. They never come out. So we need to talk about that in the second session. How do you learn to release your emotions in the appropriate way? There's also bullying. Criticism. That's missing, I'm sorry. Criticism is a big one. When you're criticized or bullied. My brother, that same one who was abused, it was interesting. I just beginning to put the dots together. Around that time that was going on, he yelled at me one day. I'm his oldest sister, 2 years older. He yelled at me one day when he was frustrated, and he said, "No one will ever love you. You will never get married." Now, I believe he was pouring out his own pain, but at the age of 14, it was a great pain inside of me. No one will ever love me. I will never get married. And of course, I began to then look for the reasons why that was true. And even after I had been married for 15 years, I didn't really believe my husband loved me. It's hard for me to say that, but it is true. It was because it left a scar. Bullying, criticism leaves scars. And we can begin to believe that what other people say about us was true after all. Have a neighbor, a man, highly successful, but he never feels worth anything. He struggles, he drives himself. You know why? Because as a young boy, his father said, "You will amount to nothing. All you do is watch video games. You will amount to nothing." And he began to live out the reality of that rejection. And of course, betrayal, divorce, that's an ultimate rejection. Suicide probably would be the greatest rejection. Where's the kindness in this? Where is the kindness? Well, God does not reject you. That is the important thing to know. There's a story in the Bible of a beautiful woman. Well, they didn't think she was beautiful. Her name was Hagar, beautiful to God. Hagar was rejected by the man she trusted. She was rejected by the woman who had set it up for her to be the surrogate mother for her child. She was finally driven into the wilderness, and there God came to her and said these words, "You're pregnant, Hagar. You'll give birth to a son. You will name him Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your cry of misery." Do you know God hears it? So Hagar called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. "You are God who sees, because I have truly seen the one who looks after me." I read that story and I got such hope. Oh God, you see me, you know me, you understand me when no one else does. When no one else does. Have you felt rejected? Let me tell you that there is one who knows and sees it all. You are not alone. And so I would add these words, so true. These are words for you and me. Nothing can separate us from God's love. Death can't, life can't, the angels won't, and all the powers of hell itself cannot keep God's love away. Our fears for today, our worries about tomorrow, or where we are, high above the sky or in the deepest ocean, nothing will be able to separate us from the love of God demonstrated by our Lord Jesus when he died for us. There is a beautiful, wonderful reality when you come to know the love of God for you, which is very, very deep. And when you know the love of God for you and his mercy that forgives you, forgives those who have rejected you, I'll tell you, you will learn to let the prisoner go free. And the prisoner inside of you is really you, because you don't feel loved. You don't feel loved. We must let the prisoner go free. All right, E, and we're going to quickly move through these, the events of extreme loss. Death, divorce, illness, handicap, loss of job, home, ambition, dream, women who wanted children and are barren, perhaps a vocation that you wanted that you never got, friendship, loss of a friendship. These are devastating things, and you need to be kind to yourself during these things and give yourself a chance and time to grieve these very, very deep, hurtful realities in your life. But there's two blessings that come to people who deal with this. Number one, we grow through what we go through. Someone has said that normative depression actually makes us stronger. It has the same effect as wind on trees. It forces our roots down deeper. And I believe that's true. I thank God for this struggle I have had, because it has made my roots deeper in what is really important in life. It's also given me compassion. And I think of my son, who was abused and bullied as a young boy at school, who escaped into drugs for a time. I look at him now and I say, that whole process that was so painful for all of us at the time has made him a deeper, stronger, amazing man, and he now works with people who are just like him, who are addicted to drugs because of a very low self-image. He knows, he understands how they feel. Someone sent me a card, and I love that card. I thought it was there, but it's not. It'll come up later. Coming. It's coming. It's coming. S is social separation. Of course, what happens when you feel depressed is that it's easy to isolate yourself. You feel ashamed. You feel embarrassed by your depression. You feel what I call terminally unique. What is terminal uniqueness about? Well, the terminal part is the way I feel I'm going to feel forever. This is never going to go away. Secondly, no one experiences what I feel. There is no one in the world. I am unique to everyone in the world. Nobody else knows these feelings. And fourthly, no one really cares about me. That's what happens when you struggle with depression. You separate yourself, you isolate yourself from others because you think that there is no one who would truly understand. And this is where my little picture is. I hope you can see that. I should have pulled it up higher. But it's a card someone sent me, and I love it because inside the card it says, friendship begins with the words, you too? You feel that way too? You see, you need to give yourself kindness and not withdraw from people. You need people. You say, but how can I find someone? We'll talk about that in the second session, but we'll also chat around the table. Social isolation does not do yourself any good. In fact, it makes matters worse. You need to give yourself the kindness of friends you can open up to. The final one is this. Depression comes often from self-centeredness. You may not have expected this to be on the list, but I quite honestly began to see in my own battle that often when I began to understand what had triggered my emotions, my depression, I found that even then I did not want to come out of it. I found there was a little bit of a comfort in self-pity. It was comfortable feeling sorry for myself. It was more comfortable feeling sorry for myself than not thinking of myself at all. And I also found that I became a little bit addicted to dysfunction. In other words, I could always make excuses for myself if I was depressed. I didn't have to take responsibility for people. I didn't have to come forward. I didn't have to change. I almost enjoyed dysfunction. That's interesting, isn't it? And also, it was very easy during that time to grow bitter instead of better. And that's why you see a spider web down there, because depression can impact and infect and consume and weave itself over all of your relationships. It just weaves a spider web of control. You must give yourself the kindness of moving outside yourself. In other words, not until you learn to give yourself away will you really find yourself. And the prime person that illustrates this is Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa struggled with depression most of her life, but what did she do with it? She used it to push her out to the needs of others. And that gave her a meaning to her life, and she wasn't then centered down in herself. There was a woman struggling with her marriage named Princess Diana. Her marriage was falling apart. She came to see Mother Teresa, and she said, Mother Teresa changed my life and showed me that there was a reason to live even in the midst of this terrible sadness and sorrow. And that's what the Bible says. If you are generous with the hungry, if you start giving yourself to the down and out, your lives will begin to glow in the darkness, and your shadowed days will be bathed in sunlight. A sunlight that comes from reaching out beyond yourself. Makes sense, doesn't it? Well, we're going to have some time to talk it over. We're going to take about 15 minutes around the tables. Perhaps there will be things that you can share about your journey or the journey of those you love. It's just going to be 15 minutes if we still have time. Anyway, we do. Vicky's going to come and she will lead us into a break time. If you need to use the restrooms, wait until after this 15 minutes, and then you will have a long break. You'll be able to get up, walk around, perhaps get some more food. But let's just talk about these things. You don't have to be honest with your own life if you don't want to, because we can speak in general terms. But I tell you, it would be helpful if some of you would say, you feel that way too? Yay! We're friends. Good. Thank you. Begin. I think the hostesses have some questions to pass around, and just share. Be real, okay? Be real.